Filmmaking, in my experience, has been a very welcome space. You're going to face a lot of obstacles that a lot of people face. You're going to face even more obstacles that only LGBT people face. But amongst my experiences in life, filmmaking is a very great allied, supporting community. My name is B Kelley, they, them. I'm a filmmaker, specifically a director. I'm trans non-binary. My passion is with working with actors, so I really like working with them to find their character and bring out the best performance. The day-to-day, it's a lot of prep, months of prep leading up to a day, maybe two of shooting, depending on if it's a commercial or maybe a longer project. The day-to-day, a lot of it is, talking to key department heads, planning out what they want to do, planning out my own blocking and stuff like that. A lot of it's communication, honestly, and then in the end, a lot of people say that directing is just making decisions, and so that often is what it comes down to. I moved 6 times before I was 10, and then another 4 or 5 times after that. Yeah, we moved to Virginia 3 different times. When we were moving, it was tough. There wasn't so much of a community. It was kind of just you had to be a chameleon and fit in wherever you could. When we finally settled a bit in Virginia, I started acting, and the theater community is really where I found myself and found a family, which was really nice. If it wasn't for that first middle school play, I wouldn't be where I am today. There's kind of a direct line I can draw there. When I was younger, it was my parents, especially my mom, from whom I drew a lot of my own emotions and emotional control, as well as being able to read and understand the emotions of others, which does really help with directing. And then from my dad, I got work ethic and determination and ambition, most of all. It was a long, confusing journey. When I was younger, it was always just the whole, I'm different, I don't know what it is type of thing. And then I think I learned what transgender meant in 9th grade. And so my plan was to run away and become a Buddhist monk and just disappear. And then made it through high school. And in college, I kind of just backed off and cut off that part of my life. Decided to have as normal of a college experience as I could. Literally at the end of college, I told my best friend, I came out to her. And after that, things started moving a little slower. I told my parents, and then nothing happened for a long time. And then in 2018, I was hired on a film where supposedly I wouldn't know anybody, which would have been a first. So I changed my entire wardrobe, I changed my name, and I went on set, and I had such an amazing experience. My first thought was, oh, this film is so special. It really was a great cast and crew and experience. And then immediately after that, I did another film and had an even better time. So I was like, okay, wait, maybe this is me. And that's when I started realizing how much better it was just being able to be myself. I made a short film about a young trans girl, which was very personal to me, but I wasn't out at that point. It was actually a year before I came out. And so the experience of going to these Q&As and film festivals and always getting that question, why did you make this film? And having to lie through my teeth and essentially say, oh, it's an important topic and it's timely and blah, 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 and skip over the element of it being incredibly personal. I kind of refused to admit it openly, even though some of the outfits I wore to those festivals was very obvious. I don't have a lot of regrets in life. That is one of the ones where if I could change something, I would have just moved my coming out right before then to experience Outfest. We premiered at Outfest. Being able to be out then would have been amazing. My experience, because I hadn't had that kind of connection to queer spaces growing up, nor had I had necessarily a queer role model, that film and the research I did for it helped me really understand and solidify my stances on trans advocacy and especially advocating for trans youth. And it definitely opened my eyes to a few things and probably expedited my own journey. It affected my work in many ways. I think at that time I was working in the camera department mostly, and it was mainly about how I communicated with others and how open and honest and friendly I could be with others, and that was a big change. I was able to make more and deeper friendships on set than I had been previously. On my directing side of things, it was nice because there was no longer this sense of pretending or this layer of separation I tried to keep. I was able to be myself authentically, and that really made things much smoother. That last time that I moved to Virginia, kind of on a whim, I auditioned for the school play and got a pretty good part and had a lot of fun with it. And that was the first time I had any real type of performance. And I found that studying and developing a character was something that I loved. And I did that all through middle school and high school as much as I could. At the end of high school, I stepped back and directed for the first time. And it just multiplied that feeling. Rather than digging a deep hole for one character, I was able to help everyone else dig their own holes and form the entire project from each of their performances and each of their developments. And that really was one form of an awakening for me. I was like, okay, this is really where my passion lies. I had done theater, and I love theater, and theater's amazing. And I think it's a wonderful space for both learning and growing and being yourself. The challenge that I really loved was the film side of things. It was hard for me to imagine doing something for the rest of my life. So the things that I liked were disparate. It was math and Spanish and film. And so when it came to choose a college, I was really having a tough time. It came down to like NYU, Penn State, and Maryland. And then just so happened that the week I needed to decide, I had a bunch of lab reports due. And my mom was like, hey, I'm unbiased, but you have 3 lab reports due tomorrow. And if you do forensic chemistry, that's what you're going to be doing every day for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh my God. So it really put into perspective, like, okay, what do I actually love doing? And what could I do every day and love doing it? And it was film. So I wound up studying a few different things in order to feel comfortable and secure that job prospects would be there while I also studied film. And then that helped me build a little network, which I used to jump around and make it to New York. It's funny, math is something I don't really get to use too much these days, but I remember a few years ago, a gaffer asked me to write a formula that had to do with stops of light lost during different frame rates. And I had so much fun. It was like uncovering a side of me that I hadn't gotten to explore and play with in a long time. And it really made my entire day. It was great. Each job in the film industry, honestly, when you think about it, requires such a different skill set. And I always say that no matter what your craft or passion or hobby is, there's always something. I mean, metal workers, carpenters, everybody, accountants, there's always a job in the industry for you. Accountants obviously use math, but then you have a gaffer and people in the lighting department are working with logarithmics, graphs and charts and stuff that they don't even realize they're doing. They learn them and they memorize them and they understand them. But if you were to show them the math side of things, they might be like, oh, well, I don't deal with that. So it's inherently there. Each of the other STEAM or STEM areas are all intrinsically tied and woven throughout the entire world of film. Tech itself has such a large footprint in film, so many different positions and departments. My experience was in camera, and I mean, there's an incredible amount of technology in camera, whether it be lighting and optical technology, coatings on the lenses, all the way through to the chip technology and the sensors and the pixels, codecs and how cameras write and read information. The engineering side of thing is prevalent and almost like a ghost on your shoulder throughout the entire process. And they're married perfectly such that the art is created through this amalgamation of engineering and art. I mean, the engineering side of things behind the film industry is incredible. What we've been able to do is similar to, I'd say, something like aviation, where you have the Wright brothers in the early 1900s been to the moon in 1969 or whatever, and now we're past the solar system with Voyager, all that kind of stuff. But then camera technology is very similar, where we had certain types of prints and everything, and then digital came about only in the last 40 years or so, 50 years. We've made leaps and bounds. And now we're almost at this point where it's gotten so good that the steps seem incremental, but at the same time, you take a company like Arri, which makes some of the best cameras in the world, and they took 11 years in between their last flagship sensor and their newest one. And while it might seem like a small step, what it can do is incredible. And it also doesn't kill their previous models, which is amazing. The engineering married with the art is really how film works. One of the things I was talking about earlier was the scale and the graph on which light falls. And in film, we measure that in dynamic range or in stops. The newest Arri sensor in the Alexa 35 has an even further dynamic range than really any of their previous cameras. I would say more so than most cameras have ever in the past, including celluloid film, which is pretty incredible, because that was, even during the past 20 years of digital age, celluloid film was really the goal which everyone was trying to achieve. So now that we can see higher into the highlights and lower into the lows, as well as to be able to have much more natural skin tones and store much more information in there, it's a huge step. VR is something that stems from originally stitching multiple photos together. So one of the fun early projects that I did was take the Apollo 11 photos, which they did a lot of panoramic photos, and not Not what we think of today where it's like an already stitched photo, but they did one photo, move slightly, another photo. And I took a while to find the common points and stitch those together. And that was kind of the early days of it. And then they started coming out with all-in-one camera systems, which were very fun to play with. Because prior to that, they had an array where they had multiple cameras, and they'd all have to be rigged and synced together, which was really beautiful, but a pain in the ass. And so once they came out with these all-in-one camera systems, which couldn't do quite as much as those arrays, but still in the end, even with those arrays, which were shooting raw 8K each camera, in the end you exported this video, which you had to watch in a display that had much lower quality. The technology behind that was pretty fascinating, and the steps that it's gone through to the point where now you can just stream it straight to your phone while you're shooting live and look around with your phone using the gyroscope in the phone. It's fascinating. Another great technological step is actually during the pandemic, we had the larger public introduction of the volume and LED wall filmmaking. Shows like The Mandalorian really brought that to the forelight. And that technology is also fascinating because it utilizes something like a game engine like Unreal, or Unreal is really the big one, in order to create a virtual camera to then match and track to your actual camera so that it moves at the same time. And you can change your dynamic lighting, you can match lighting, you can create elements within, so that nowadays you can actually upload that image live and the director can see live what their composite's gonna look like rather than just looking at a green screen. When I was locked in my apartment, I put a shoe on a box and bought a chip that told the computer it was a VR headset, but wasn't. And then I had my friend 3D print a little plastic rig to be able to mount a VR controller onto my camera so that I could track the camera in real time with the Unreal Engine. And I didn't get too far. People have done amazing things with it, but I did get as far as being able to track it and get dynamic lighting within the program so that I could see live the key that I was doing. So that was fun and interesting, but in the end it was a shoe on a box. And then it was a shoe on Mars, and it was a shoe on whatever. So I feel like my experience was such that by the time that I was ready to come out, people were ready. I had this support group already around me. And one of the stories I like to tell is how I went from friend to friend and visited them in person and would come out to them. And each of them were like, cool. What else? And I was like, oh, okay. And so it really didn't stop our friendship or change it too much. And in the industry, my close friends, my friends who were producers and stuff, it was like flipping a switch. They're like, great, we were like this, now we're like this. And they're very supportive. One of my closest friends, she and her wife, they've been in the industry for a while, and they've had their own journey through as members of the LGBT community. And they were one of my biggest allies, of course. One of my friends is from Kentucky, and he was a huge ally, and he's always been a big ally. Everybody's been very nice. And I know that's just my personal experience, and there are definitely stories to the contrary. But from my experience, film is a great area in order to be yourself. The film we just did, that we just wrapped 2 weeks ago, we had this plethora of fun queer people from all over the place. And the main producer, she's gay. There was me. There were a few queer people who were just queer in general. On every set that I've worked, it's been fantastic. Sometimes you run into like a corporate situation, which is a little more prim and proper and serious. I don't often feel like I have to downplay myself. As with any personality trait and any intrinsic characteristic of a person, there are times when it's more appropriate to be out and flamboyant and be yourself. And then there are more serious times, especially if you're working like an interview where there's a very emotional subject or something like that, or you have to wear your show blacks and you'd be kind of out of the way and out of sight, out of mind. But in general, it's a wonderful place to just kind of be me. I personally have had multiple privileges that have smoothed the path out for me. So my experience isn't the same as people who come from multiple marginalized communities. I really just have the LGBT community. And because the welcoming aspect of film and art in general, I have felt that there were paths for me to take that were welcomed and supported. I know from experience with my friends that they've had to fight and they've had to struggle and prove themselves more than others. My friends who are women in science have had to work extra hard, and they're still not making the same kind of money. In film, I haven't had that experience. It's nice also that when you're on a union set, the rates are all negotiated for you, so everybody knows what everybody's making. When you're on a non-union set, it's very open. It's a good thing to be able to communicate with each other. And I have friends that they're like, hey, I'm working for this job. What did you charge them last time? There's no behind closed doors element to that, which is nice. I do think that my life experience has helped maybe give a little bit of validity to some of the stories that I write and the characters that I create, and maybe some of the stances or opinions that I have on set. So I'd say I've only ever been out in film, and I've definitely felt valued within that community, within that space and industry. And prior to that, I was just in the closet. And so the value wasn't affected by myself, my actual self. Looking back, it does feel weirdly like cheating, not being me. But since then, not only have I felt valued, I've felt more valued, but also more appreciated, more supported. Whenever I give my opinion, it feels better because it's my personal opinion that I can say wholeheartedly. A big part of what I try and do with my work is to normalize the experience, because I think we've had for years LGBT media, which is focused so heavily on kind of the negative and the struggle that we go through. And we in the community are well aware of that. We know that. While it's important for everyone else to understand what that's like and see and know and feel and hear what that's like, I also want there to be some media, including the projects that I make, which are for us and show happy moments and show people who are supported and loved. So that's how I make it in my films. They just are. They are supported. Their family does love them, that type of thing. Their friends, they have a good friend group. And that way they can deal with the normal problems of being a high school teenager or things that everybody struggles with. And I think that I've found in my experience that while that might be optimistic in some eyes, it also helps to show people who are not in the LGBT community that we do struggle with the same things and we are relatable in more ways than just being a person. We're going through a lot of the same things. It might be different, like it might be different for us to do A, B, or C, but we're still doing those same things that they are. The first step is just equalizing. And so getting the representation both on set and behind the camera and in the office and on the screen, once that's kind of equaled out a bit, then we can start to work on better hiring practices and more equal and everything like that. But I think there needs to be a little bit of an effort to kind of bring things up to par before we can work on what things look like going forward. So for me, I think the way we are right now, people are really valuing authentic opinions, authentic experiences, and that's fantastic. One of the things that I was asked a lot was about casting for queer characters. And I always said that, as with anything, any authentic character, there is a community for it, and you should look into that community because the talent's there. When I was doing DIT work, the most cameras I ever had was 23 for a shoot, and that was an insane experience. I had 10 computers running, so that was fun. But at the same time, I think the things I'm most proud of are all directing works, whether it be working with kids or marginalized communities. I did a project with the deaf community, which was very cool. A lot of directors will say "and" right before they call action, and for me, that "and" is the culmination of infinite amount of work, an untold amount of work from all across the preparation and the builds and everything like that, coming down to this one moment where everyone's ready and quiet, and you call that "and" action. And right before action, anything could happen. It's almost like an hourglass. Everything comes to that point, and then from there, anything's possible. It could be the best thing ever, it could be the worst thing ever, But just for that moment, it's like a scale's perfectly balanced and everything's perfect because you've worked so hard for that moment. I love being able to create every day. It's wonderful. And I love it. Weirdly, this sounds weird saying it in a sentence, but I love loving what I do because there's so many people I know that can't wait for the end of the day, or they can't wait for their vacation or the weekend, or some people can't wait to retire. And I really, truly love what I do. And the best part about it is, I think for me, that I've been able to design this life to be dynamic every day. No 2 days are the same. Even if you're on the same project, you're often not shooting the same material or you're not working in the same space. And it's allowed me to explore my city, explore the world a little bit, hopefully more to come. So I like having a varied, dynamic life. The reason I was late today actually is I was in a meeting about representation that I'm excited about and hoping happens this year for a directing standpoint. And then I have a couple projects that I'm very excited about. One has to do with environmental activism and a true story from the 90s that we're trying to develop into a narrative project. I've always got projects in the chamber ready to go. I think that if I achieve my near-term goals, it'll put me in the right place for what my long-term goals are. I think the ideal world that I try and set in my projects is that their LGBT journey is just like how it was for me moving around, or how it was for somebody growing up in Philly, or it's just a part of their lives. And just like I don't know somebody who grew up in France and I get to learn about their experience, that's what I want the LGBT to be like. It's like, oh, You grew up in France. Oh, you are gay. Like, what's that like? It's an intrinsic part of you, but it doesn't define you. And that normalization is something that I think we're not there yet. We're now just starting to celebrate ourselves, and that's an incredibly important phase of this whole journey. For now, it's important to celebrate and tell our stories and have representation so that down the line, it can just be another part of our lives. Don't run away. Don't ignore it. Really do look into and explore that aspect of yourself. Oh, and seek out community, seek out mentors, because I didn't. That's something I wish I had done, because it's almost like I didn't know there was this paper space around me that I could just reach through at any moment. I didn't know. And now that I know where I grew up, there were those resources, and there are those resources now. Find them. And the internet is a huge resource. It's just like anything else. People say it can be good or bad, that's fine. It allows anybody in rural America to find this space, this community, these videos, it's important. I sent my cousin, just reached out about their own experience and starting that conversation. And it's very early days for them, but the first thing I did was send them you guys' website and everything. Like, videos like this and projects like these are important to even get out there. Keywords, searching on the internet, just look for it. It's there. If you want to be a director, take acting classes. Everybody should take an acting class. It's really important to know the only people in front of the camera are the actors, and it's important for people to appreciate what they're doing. And also for the actors in turn to appreciate everybody else behind the camera. Leave your hometown as much or as little as you can. Just get out there, utilize resources that are on the internet. We have YouTube, the whole 9 yards about you can do it all with your phone and everything, that's fine. Learn how to do it properly with your phone. Make sure you're doing things well. I remember when I first started working, my dad said, like, oh, you've got to get a second or a third job so that you can make enough money to retire. And I was like, oh, Dad, let me tell you how I'm gonna die. I'm gonna call cut on my masterpiece, check the gate, that's a wrap, and just die right there. Like, that's how I want to die.